Folks, I am very happy to welcome to As the World Churns, the executive director of ACLU of New Jersey, Amol Sinha. Amol, let me just say this. A few weeks ago, because time is a construct that I don't have a handle on anymore, but a few weeks ago, Mayor Ras Baraka was arrested by ICE agents because him, alongside some of his colleagues, were asking for requesting access to a detention center in his jurisdiction, wanting to know what is happening on the inside of this detention center. How are the people being treated? What conditions are they being forced to endure, etc. Not only was he arrested, he was actually, from my eyes, from my vantage point of the video that I saw, physically accosted by ICE agents and roughed up, right? And when the Trump administration was asked about, right, the physicality of the ICE agents, put that on the mayor and said that it was his fault. He was told to stand down. He did not. When you saw that, what did you make of the videos? What did you make of the arrest?
Well, first of all, Danielle, thank you so much for having me, and thank you to As the World Turns for covering this issue. Look, the arrest that we saw on video, clear as daylight, was brutal. We saw, members of Congress, as you mentioned, and Ras Baraka come together to hold a press conference, and they were invited in. After some negotiation, they were invited into the facility to Delaney Hall, and then when the agents decided that Mayor Baraka was not welcome, they decided to tell him that he had to leave, and he calmly exited, according to the video. And he was on the other side of the fence when the officers, I think they were with the Department of Homeland Security, they decided to swarm him and arrest him and drag him out, and put him in cuffs. It was surprising to say the least, and jarring to watch. We had colleagues there on the ground, during that interaction, and we were fearful as to what would happen to other people that were there. But what we saw was only the mayor was targeted, and
Mhm.
only the mayor was arrested. And now there are rumors flying about that the members of Congress may be facing charges in the future.
Mhm.
But the Trump administration is basically taking an instance of a press conference and a tour of a facility that was, by the way, it's authorized for members of Congress to
Yep.
conduct oversight, including unannounced visits in detention centers. They're taking what is a legal right, a right of Congress members to conduct oversight, and the right of the mayor to know what's going on in his own backyard, and weaponizing it to target their political opponents. The Trump administration has basically said that they are, and on several instances during the campaign and after the campaign, they've said that they will go after people who disagree with them. They've said that they will go after people who will dissent from the Trump administration's agenda. And here we're seeing it, I think, in real time, where Mayor Baraka was targeted. Look, he is the mayor of the biggest city in New
Mhm.
Jersey. It happens to be one of these so-called sanctuary cities. He's put up some protections in the city to protect immigrant residents, and we're a part of New Jersey, which is one of the most welcoming states for immigrants. So it doesn't surprise me that we would see some of the first arrests of political opponents happening in New Jersey. But I'll say this, we can't forget the premise of why the mayor was there in the first place.
Mhm.
He was there to oppose the Trump administration's extreme mass deportation agenda and uplift the humanity of the people that are detained behind those walls. I want to make sure that we're doing that because on the one hand, of course, a political arrest of any sort is rightfully making news, and it's important to cover it because it is a scary time. But on the other hand, it's also important to make sure that we're not losing the plot here, which is that there are potentially thousands of people that are being detained right here in New Jersey, which has now become sort of the hub or the epicenter of Trump's mass deportation agenda because of our proximity to Newark Airport, because of our proximity to New York, and many other reasons why New Jersey would become sort of the ground zero, so to speak, of the extreme anti-immigrant agenda.
I want to take a step back for a moment because I appreciate you laying out the particulars and to make sure that we're not losing sight of why the mayor was there to begin with. But I want to dig into, if I can, the pageantry that Donald Trump is setting up with regard to the political theater, right? And the arrest of the mayor and making a show of force, if you will, right? What in your mind is the purpose of this, and what is Donald Trump and this administration trying to signal? And do you think that there are other mayors and other governors that will see this as a direct hit on their power, right? Because again, Donald Trump is the one that is acting as if he is an autocrat and that no other, not the state level, not local level, no one else has any authority. He alone, right, is the ruler of this nation. And so, what do you think the response is from this arrest around the country?
I hope people see it for what it is, which is a targeted political attack. And we have US attorneys in New Jersey and across the country that are willing to do the president's bidding and adhere to his political agenda. That's a dramatic shift from the way in which federal prosecutors have conducted themselves historically. What we've seen in the past is, federal prosecutors have had for the most part, utmost integrity, and they've been trying to uphold the rule of law. But just as the Trump administration is going after immigrants, they are also undermining and eroding the rule of law every step of the way, whether it's Mayor Baraka being arrested or the threat of other elected officials being arrested, or the judge that we saw in Wisconsin,
Mhm.
Hannah Dugan, who was arrested for not doing the Trump administration's bidding. So I hope that this is a moment of reflection for governors and mayors across the country who understand that the reason why we have a federal system and a state system working together is because there are state interests and there are federal interests. And no one person, no one individual gets to decide uh, sort of the political and policy agenda for the entire country.
Mhm.
And that's the reason why we have a system of checks and balances too at the federal level. That we have, the executive department, the federal, the legislative branch, and the courts working in tandem to make sure that no power goes unchecked. But here we have an administration, uh, a president who wants to eradicate checks and balances, who wants to make sure that everybody falls in line. And I heard somebody eloquently speak about whether or not we are still in a democracy in this country. And they said that once we get to a point where there is a consequence for disagreeing with the president,
Right.
then you're no longer in a democracy. And so I fear that we're there now. We are in a moment where people are being made to disappear and made to face charges and other sorts of consequences on their careers because they disagree with the Trump administration.
I wanna follow up on that because while I believe that language and words matter, right? That the words that this administration has used with regard to speaking about those seeking asylum, speaking about immigrants and migrants as vermin and as terrorists and as, people we need to be rid of, as an invasion, all of this language, right, was conjured as a way to be able to use the Alien Enemies Act, right, to say that there are all of these things that we're not seeing in our day to day as American citizens, but they're telling us are there. Does it matter then whether or not we can call this current iteration of America a democracy or not? I guess my question is, should we be harping on that fact? Or should we just be moving knowing that we want to preserve whatever remnants are left, but that the reality is the America that was hasn't been since Donald Trump came down that escalator nearly 10 years ago. And that's the reality, right? And so, do we need to be part and parceling words, or do we just need to be moving in a way that clearly indicates that the America that was is no longer?
That's a fair point, and I would argue that it started well before the escalator moment, right? We were on our way to a place where the fundamentals of our democracy were going to be eroded, and it wasn't a question of if, but a question of when, and who would be the one doing the eroding. And so here we have Donald Trump now in his second administration, um, more empowered, right, and more you know the administration sort of grew smarter in a way where they have more loyalists surrounding him, fewer people, if anyone, willing to be the quote unquote adult in the room to give sound advice and to say, look, that's a bridge too far. And so what I'm expecting is that we're going to need to be firing on all cylinders here. We're going to need to be making sure, on the one hand, that we are pushing back wherever we can, whenever we see the rule of law being eroded, or immigrants being dehumanized, or LGBTQ plus members of our community um,
Mhm.
being targeted. And on the other hand, continuing to build where we can while we work to defeat, delay, or dilute the Trump administration's tactics. We
Mm.
also need to be working to expand constitutional rights wherever we can. And I think about states like New Jersey, where we have a governor and an attorney general who are dedicated to the rule of law, who are actually values aligned with us for the most part at the ACLU. Now we at the ACLU sue our government, right? So we have both the
Right.
yeah, we have the right hand and the left hand where we get to collaborate where we can, but we also are adversarial to our state. But it makes for this beautiful relationship the way it's supposed to be, where we are building up things where there's agreement, and when there's disagreement, we know that it's principled. And so we are experiencing something a little bit different, or quite different, at the federal level. But we need to rely on our states to push back and be the firewall for freedom, as we're calling it, that we know
Mhm.
this moment needs, so that our residents are protected. So while the threat of our democracy being eroded is certainly a real one, and it's certainly happening as we speak, and we may be striving for saving the remnants on the federal level, I do think there is a lot of opportunity and a lot of hope on the state level to push back where we can and model what the United States should be. And I think that can start right here in New Jersey.
Do you think that there is then a healthy amount of coordination that is happening between like-minded states that have, that have thoughtful leadership and governors that still believe in the rule of law? Is there enough coordination happening in order to hold?
I could say that I've seen our Attorney General, Matt Platkin, lead litigation against the Trump administration on behalf of several states' attorneys general. So there was litigation around the birthright citizenship question. There's been litigation around federal funding and a number of other issues. I think he's up to more than 2 dozen lawsuits now, and I've seen good coordination happening from the legal perspective. I work for a federated organization, the ACLU. We have a nationwide organization and a nationwide presence, and one of our greatest strengths is that we have boots on the ground in every single state in the district in this country. And so I know that the ACLU is highly coordinated right now. We are constantly talking to our colleagues across the country about what's working and what's not working, and how we can move in alignment. And we know that politics are different in each state, even in states that are sort of embracing of civil rights and liberties. The politics may be different, and different things and different tactics may be working. But it's really important that we all stay in touch and coordinate with each other. And I know that the legislators, the members of Congress and senators of states that believe in civil rights and liberties are working together to push back on attempts to undermine them. And so hopefully we'll see more and greater coordination. But if your question is it sufficient? I think the answer is no, right? Like we need more coordination. We need a cohesive message. We need to make sure that we are all pushing back wherever we can as loudly as we can. Look, there's no reason why the three members of Congress in New Jersey that decided that they wanted to go on a tour had to go it alone, right? Like there are members of Congress all across this country with detention centers in their backyards that should be doing the same thing, demanding oversight, making those visits, making sure that we're adhering to the rule of law, and that we're not complicit with atrocities and humanitarian violations that the Trump administration has basically promised.
Well, last question for you with just a minute or so left. For people who want to get involved and people who want, to help, whether it's the ACLU of New Jersey, which you're leading, or nationally, please tell them how they can get involved.
Yeah, so the ACLU is a wonderful organization to get involved with. If you go to aclu.org or Google ACLU People Power, there are ways for individuals to get involved in and plugged in with their local affiliate or with events happening in their communities. Of course, look, the ACLU cannot do this work alone. We've already, since day one of this administration, filed over 110 lawsuits, legal actions against the
Mm.
administration, and there's more happening every single day. In the first Trump administration, we filed 430 legal actions against that administration during the course of it, and we're on par to do um, much more than that going forward for this administration. But we don't do it alone. We work with our partners across the country, and here in New Jersey, I can say that we have so many dedicated partners that believe in the things that we do. And I'll say this that it's not just immigrants, it's not just uh, judges, it's not just politicians, it's not just law firms, it's not just universities, it's all of us that the Trump administration is trying to go after. So it would be one thing if they tried to target one of these institutions or one of these groups of individuals, but the fact that they're going after all of us at the same time gives me a little bit of hope, absurdly. And that hope is that, it'd be one thing if they went after one of us and we had to fight it alone. But the fact that we have basically a majority of the population being targeted, our values being maligned, our principles being undermined,
Mhm. Mhm.
that gives me hope that we can mount a pretty valiant fight, that we can push back and say that we will not be complicit with the atrocities and the violations that we're seeing in this administration.
Well, Amal, we will leave it there today, and we thank you so much for the work that ACLU of New Jersey is doing, that you're doing and leading, and we hope to have you back again soon. Really appreciate you.
Thanks so much for having me.